You are listening to the Gritty Podcast, where we talk about all things gritty. Welcome to the Gritty Podcast. I am your host, Brian Call. I've got Brad Hunt here beside me. Today's podcast is with our friends at the Northern Hunter Podcast, which is, if you don't know about it, it's a new show. I think they've got around 20-something shows published.
24, something like that.
More coming all the time. These are Alaskans making hunting information available to Alaskans and everyone else from the perspective of the guys that live up north. If you ever wanted to do a hunt up north, this is your resource. And great show. They have great guests, and the guys are awesome. So I met Dalton a couple years back when I was in Alaska and got to know him. Just an excellent human being, and met his wife. We hung out in town. Mo and James, they're great guys. So I'm excited for their show and what they're doing. You'll get to meet them on the show, get a little background from each one of them. In the show, we dive into a couple of topics. We're going to split this into two different podcasts. After we do this dive on bear hunting in the deep snow, snowshoes, and all the gear questions and so forth, tactics, we get into another topic about the growth of their show. And Alaskans, in my experience, tend to be sort of keep to themselves, more private individuals, where they kind of aren't super excited about all the out-of-staters and the military guys hitting the mountains. So I asked them a little bit about that. Like, here you are providing great information to the world. How do you balance that against the culture there of keeping everything super private and secret at the same time? How do you balance that with, the people who are going to be upset with what you're doing as a show that provides like very useful information to those that aspire to hunt in Alaska someday? Their philosophy behind that. It gets to be a really interesting conversation. Something I think that needs to be addressed. So it's a great show. Hope you enjoy it. Look for 2 parts. These guys are great. And then go and subscribe to the Northern Hunter Podcast. If you like our show and you want to support us, go and shop at peaksequipment.com. Use the code GRITTY. Get yourself some gaiters, which I can't recommend enough. I think they're probably the best gaiter on the market. Yeah. Bold statement, but I think it's true. And use the code to get some trekking poles. We got the Duo headlamp over at Peaks. They've got the Peaks Teepee, the new Solitude. Can't recommend the gear enough. Go use the code GRITTY over there. And then use the code GRITTY over at Stealthy Hunter as well. Get yourself a glassing pad, get yourself a rifle cover, get yourself some supplements, take care of your body and your health, prepare for this season's grueling outdoor grind.
Adventures.
Yes. So that's it. Without further ado, let's get into the show. Hope you enjoy it. Don't forget to subscribe to the Northern Hunter Podcast when you're done. Thanks for tuning in, and stay gritty. All right, folks. Welcome to the Gritty Podcast. I am your host, Brian Call, and I am joined tonight by some buddies. Dalton, you and I have met each other, been friends for a little bit of time here. We got Dalton Gray on the podcast. I've got James Payne, and it says, I know it's Mo Humphreys, but it says Mariah. What kind of name is that? Because I know a Mariah Carey, but
I get that a lot.
Yeah.
So my parents are Christians, and I'm a Christian, and in the Bible, there's a mountain called Mount Moriah, and my parents were very strong believers in the meaning of names, and Moriah means provided by Jehovah. And after they named me that, my mom started getting questions about why they named me with a girl's name. She had never thought about it before that, and my response is always, well, lands in the Bible were always named after men, so it's a man's name.
There we go. I like it.
It's a lot easier just to tell people Mo most of the time.
Yeah.
But
yeah.
Hey, I gotta say, Mo is pretty manly, actually.
Oh yeah,
Mo.
it is.
It's like my grandpa's name was Joe.
Yeah.
Just real simple.
Yeah. Nothing else that raised you strong.
So
Right.
Like a boy named Sue. Yeah.
And so you fellas have started the Northern Hunter podcast
Yes.
yes.
and
Yep.
out of Alaska. And and it's funny because I met Dalton, for people that are listening, fans of Gritty Podcast. I met Dalton in Alaska after Ryan and I had gone down there, and a lot of people have seen that series that we produced of us hunting caribou and moose out of Alaska. We were out there with Chris Tobias, our friend Chris, and we were up north pretty far, and it was an awesome hunt. And we come into town, and we just hit people up on our locals community, which is our Gritty Stealthy community, where people are signed up as members. It's a little private community, and we just hit people up and said, hey, we're in Alaska. We're not going to name the city or anything, but we were in Alaska, and we were like, hey, guys, anybody want to drive up here, hang out with us, get some pizza or whatever? And Dalton and his wife came, and a couple other couples, and we got to hang out for the night and just hang out with some people that love hunting, and got to know Dalton a little bit there. And then, Dalton, you told me that you were going to perhaps, maybe, kick off basically a hunting podcast that's based in Alaska for Alaskans, and you had a lot of questions, and I was excited to share. But I have to tell you, I get people coming to me all the time about that, and they never do anything.
Yeah.
You fellas did it. You did it. I think you're 20 something shows in. 20.
Yeah.
And the show is well received. It's getting a lot of attention. Lampers has listened to every single podcast. I have to confess,
Wow.
I have not, but he has listened to every one.
Oh man.
Wow.
So you have a fan in Ryan who's also now addicted to Alaska and everything Alaskan.
Yeah.
So I got to hand it to you. You did a great job. I wanted to have you on the podcast so my audience can get to know you, find out who you are. Folks, check out their podcast, the Northern Hunter podcast. So let's go around the horn and get to know each of you. And let's start with you, Dalton. Give me a little background, who you are, a little about Dalton.
Okay. Yeah. Well, I was born in Fairbanks here as all of our hometowns now. Back in the 90s, thankfully, I'm not a 2000 person. I'm proud of that. I was born in the 1900s. But my family heritage is rich in hunting. My dad's dad owned a big archery shop in the 60s and 70s down in Southern California, and he was a guide down there and a big time bow hunter. And he saw the train coming out of the tunnel with the way California was going, and shipped his family up via the Alaska Highway in the late 70s, and that's where my dad was raised. Obviously, big time outdoorsman, and anyway, so I grew up in a hunting family. My folks were missionaries when I was a young kid, and I spent a number of my childhood years overseas in Fiji, and but not allowed to have guns over there, but we still had a subscription to Traditional Bow Hunter magazine, and I had a recurve and a longbow all my childhood, and that was always something that I really look forward to coming back to the States someday, back to Alaska really, and being able to just jump right back into hunting. And I would shoot small game things over there in Fiji, but there's really nothing for big game hunting opportunities. So that was always on my bucket list to come back and hunt nonstop. And we came back when I was a teenager. And funny enough, Mo was my first hunting partner.
Yep.
As soon as he got his first pickup truck when we were young teenagers, man, we were gone 5-6 nights a week, no exaggeration. We were gone all the time hunting and bear baiting and getting into trouble. And I always knew that my dream was to be in the hunting industry in some capacity. So I became a guide here a few years ago up here in Alaska. I've spent a couple of years down on the coast now, helping to guide spring brown bear hunts and some black bear as well. People like to think of them as Kodiak bears. They're just coastal brown bears in Alaska. They have them on the peninsula. They have them on Kodiak. They have them in Prince William Sound. They have them in Southeast, down in the ABC Islands, down towards the capital of Juneau. And the size does vary depending on region, but bear hunting has kind of been my shtick throughout everything. I'm addicted to bear hunting. I love big bears. I've said it a bunch in our podcast. Use big guns, kill big bears. And I really get a kick out of big bears, and getting those 9.5, 10-foot class bears is just something special. So I've been a guide now for a few years, and probably a year and a half ago now, the three of us met together at my place, and we had a discussion. And James is the entrepreneur of the group by a long shot, and he pitched us this idea, and he said, "What do you guys think about a media company for Alaska?" And we all immediately went, "Absolutely!" Like this was just an easy answer for us to just do this together. And we've all hunted together and spent a lot of time together in the woods, and we all knew that we do the same thing, and we just wanted to present it to our audience. And so that, I mean, I guess that's enough about me. In a nutshell, I've been back in Alaska now for, I guess, almost 10 years now, and got to finish my teen years and finish high school here in Fairbanks, and then just like I said, have been addicted to hunting and being outside ever since. And that's so it's like I said, I always knew I wanted to be involved in the industry in some way. And it started out as guiding. And I even told my wife, for instance, I said, I don't know that I'm going to be a full-time guide forever, but this is going to open doors for whatever that ends up morphing into in the industry in some capacity. And that's been what this has become right now.
Yeah. What would how old are you now, Dalton?
25.
25. Dang. So James, how old are you?
I just turned 33.
Okay. So you got a little wisdom on young Dalton there.
I bring the patience to the group. So.
Right.
Yeah. All right. Well, James, tell me a little bit about you then.
So my name is James Payne. I grew up in the Midwest. I'm a Kansas boy. So I grew up in Wichita, or just north of there, actually. And my family comes from the Ohio region mostly. Most of my relatives are up there, and I joined the Army at 19 years old, and got Uncle Sam saw fit to send me up to the great state of Alaska. So that was probably the best thing that ever happened to me. And I came up here back in 2009, and it was a little bit of a rough transition. I'm not going to lie, going from a place that's 115 in the summer to a place that gets negative 50 in the winter. But
yeah, that's a change.
Yeah,
and it's pretty flat there out of Kansas.
Oh, it's very flat. I could see Colorado out my back door. Right. But the landscape up here and just the environment, it's so freeing and so amazing, and I fell in love with it pretty quick. And so I spent several years just diving into the hunting world as much as I could, and trying to get out with anybody that would take me, and really, really trying to get into that. I bit into it pretty early, and mostly my passion for hunting comes from a desire to kind of subsist off the land, you could say. So Alaska offers so many opportunities, and that's the big reason I live here. Is there's always something to go after. There's always an open season for something, whether it's hunting, fishing, anything. And there's so much opportunity to really fill the freezer and really provide your family with good quality, solid meat from the woods, and kind of live that old traditional lifestyle. I grew up reading about trappers and frontiersmen and everything. And so when I got the opportunity to kind of live that life myself, man, I just went after it. And so
nice.
And, part of that was coming up into there, like we had talked about, I had a hard time figuring out exactly where to go, what to do, how to do it, kind of set up, getting into ballistics and diving into the long range shooting world, and really figuring out how to find moose, not just going to the woods. They're out there, but I mean, that does work, but knowing where to go and what to do, it really, there's not a whole lot of resources out there for a new guy in a new environment if you don't fall into the right groups. And I really wanted to start something that kind of would help the new hunter, like I was back in the early years in Alaska, and help them to figure out how exactly they were going to live out their dreams. And Dalton and I had talked, we've known each other for years. We've hunted together for years, and we'd meet up on job sites and everything. We'd end up at the same buildings, and talking about how there wasn't really a good media presence for that. There wasn't a good blog or a good podcast or anything like that to really help educate people on hunting specifically for Alaska. Even when you're looking into bear baiting and things like that, there's a lot of great videos out there, but they're all usually in the lower 48 or predator hunting, things like that. They're all usually in the Midwest, hunt coyotes where there's a million of them all over the place. And so when I finally got kind of tired of there not being anything like that, and that's when, well, like Dalton said, we all had this meeting and sat down, and it really kind of turned into this amazing group, because we kind of have varying perspectives from varying backgrounds, and we each have our own strengths and our own areas that we can kind of split up the load of the work of putting something like this on. You know, it's some people manage the administrative side of things, and you know, Mo is just an amazing tech guy. I don't even know how you do half the things you do, but I don't even try to think about how you do half the things you do.
Absolutely the humble, quiet brains behind this show getting produced every single week.
He's an absolute magician.
So I was going to say, I feel you, Mo. Like, I feel you. Like, I am the guy that runs all the tech, and I'm not very good at it, but I am the guy. And when it comes to the cameras and filming and doing the hunts and editing the videos, you can sure as hell bet Ryan Lampers ain't doing any of that work. So there's he has other, let's just say he has other skills he brings to the table, other qualities, but often us tech guys are the unsung heroes, really, at the end of the day. So Mo, I want to let me hear about you. So you seem younger. I'm looking at your face. So where do you clock in at?
I'm 24.
24. Oh, okay. So
I look quite young.
I have a picture of me. I look like I was 12 until I was 35. So
we all do without the facial hair.
You should see Dalton without a beard. But.
That doesn't happen anymore. The beard stays on for life now.
Yeah. I hear you there. So 24, and you run a lot of this IT. You got a great system going there. I'm impressed. So tell me a little bit about yourself.
Well, born and raised here. My dad moved up to Alaska in his 20s, and because he'd heard about the hunting and the fishing, and that's what he loved to do. And so, I saw he took me into the woods as quick as he could. I remember riding around in a car with him. He'd bow hunt the management area for moose every September, and I'd ride around in the car with him like he hunted moose. And then my earliest memories are either shooting a bow with my dad, or the first time I was ever on a bear bait, I was 7 years old with a coloring book and in a tree stand. And
true Alaskan right there.
First time I saw a grizzly bear, first time I saw a black bear, and they're 10 yards from me. I'm in a tree stand, but they were quite close. And he drugged me along for a long time, and I wanted to go because I wanted to be with my dad. But once I became a teenager, I really, really started to enjoy it and to get it. Once, when I was, I think I was 12, I killed my first black bear at a bait. Wow. And I've been doing it ever since. I still do a lot with him. And Dalton and I, like he said, when we were teenagers, when he got back, we hit it off and spent every hour we could in the woods hunting, looking for stuff. And that's where a lot of our honestly, there's a lot of stuff you can learn on the internet, and a lot of stuff you can learn from people, but a lot of stuff we learned was just by doing it the wrong way.
Yeah. Well, that's really cool. I would say, Dalton, I wanted to pick your guys' brain about the hunt. I have a hunt coming up here for spring grizzly bear, and I really wanted to get your, we'll be chasing them just coming out of the dens. They ought to be. And I have some experience with a hunt like this, but I wanted to pick your brain on it a little bit because, there tends to be a style that some Alaskans like, which is to ride them down on a snowmobile or not to get too far out of the truck, right. And then there's the hardcore Alaskans who are willing to put on some snowshoes. So I wanted to, actually, get your, expertise on this. And another topic I wanted to cover too was more about your show and what you're doing, because I'm impressed. I want to find out from your perspective, why you think the show is doing well and what your plans are moving forward. But also, it's very easy to be liked, appreciated, and valued when you're the underdog. When you start being the top dog, and in the culture in Alaska, just from what I've seen, you're not going to be liked very much down the road, maybe by some folks. It's a funny culture up there, in my opinion. I'll ask you guys what you think about that. Put you on the spot, okay? Yeah. So, but let's start with just grizzly bear hunting, okay? So, it'll be, somewhere around mid-April, okay? And we're gonna be hitting a trailhead, and we're gonna ride miles and miles in on a snowmobile. I did it before. I've shared that experience with you. That time of year is so cool. We're driving around, and it looks like something out of the movies. I mean, it looks like something out of Star Wars, Empire Strikes Back. It's just snow as far as you can see, and then all of a sudden, it was real calm. And then the next day we're cruising through a little canyon on the snow machine, and then a giant hole is there. And it's obvious there is a bear that was in there that popped out, went a few feet, and went back in. So he's still there. Yeah. Okay. What's the approach in a situation like that from Dalton, from Mo, from James? What's the Northern Hunt podcast approach that you would recommend in that situation?
Well, the first thing I have to say, Brian, is if you want to be recognized as a true Alaskan hunter, you can't call it a snowmobile.
Yeah.
A sled. Okay, a sled.
It's a sled.
Or a snow machine.
Yeah, it's not it's not a snowmobile.
Hey, man.
Just like a four-wheeler is not a quad. Yeah. But anyway, as far as the den hunting goes, I do have a few hunts that I've done for myself here in the last few years. I've talked about it on our show a little bit, but I haven't really gotten into much detail about den hunting. We were going to talk about that coming up soon, and we still will. Oh, yeah. I like to pick areas that are hard to access, that eliminate the drive-by hunters just by the difficulty of the terrain. So that means I don't have any other pressure in there. And I have a particular spot that I've snowshoed into just from my access point with a vehicle. No specifics, but I'll drive to a spot. I know a canyon that holds bears where they're going to den, and I know that they have good slopes that get some sun that time of year. And I know that when the temperature gets about right, and I just know that within a few days of that, they're going to be coming out of the hole. And just to get in there, I'm going about 5 or 6 miles over the course of a couple. I mean, at minimum 1,500 feet elevation gain just to get up into this valley. And how do I say this lightly? That's not easy. For anybody that's ever had any snowshoeing experience in April in Alaska, knows that it sucks. I think that's the scientific term for it. And especially when you're carrying in a pack with enough gear and warm weather stuff and a colder rated bag than you would use in August and September, because there's still 6 feet of snow on the ground. You have a full pack on your back with a rifle and all your kit, and you're on snowshoes. If you're lucky, the snowshoes are rated for the weight that you're actually at with that pack on. And you're still post-holing up to your crotch in the snow sometimes. And that is an exercise in frustration. And you're falling over and you're getting tipped over. And I've broken trekking poles doing that before. But the whole point is it's not easy. It's really, really difficult to do that. But because you're willing to do that, you're not going to have any other competition. I've never had competition in that spot for spring bears. Generally, the grizzly bears in in this particular mountain range that I'm thinking of, that's we'll just call it South Central Alaska.
Okay.
Generally speaking, I'm seeing the dens start at about 4,000 feet, sometimes 3,500. But Alaska doesn't have like 15,000 foot peaks. I know people like to think of Alaska as this rugged, jagged wasteland covered in snow and ice. But really, I mean, even sheep hunting in Alaska, you're generally never going to kill a ram at 6,000 or 7,000 feet. I mean, that's like some of the tallest peaks we have in the huntable areas. So for the most part, grizzly bears, you'll see den about 4,000 feet, sometimes up in that 5,500 feet range. And the dens that I've seen, man, if I come across one that's blown and there's not tracks coming away from it, like he went back in the hole, I'm going to stay there until I see it, because you never know. And if you have a spotter and you have a good gauge of how big that hole is, and you can look at the tracks from a good distance without disturbing it, then you can kind of gauge if it's a big track, or if you can tell that it's a sow with cubs. Obviously, if there's more than one set of tracks, then just keep on walking, because that's a sow with cubs.
That is a very good point.
But I have run across a few in that situation that you mentioned, and I mean, many times I've waited there and then I'm out of time in a day or two and I never see the bear and he just doesn't come back out. Or other times, I guess I should cover this while I'm on it. Boars, especially, I have seen, will leave the den, go down, scavenge around for a bit, look if they can find some dead winter kill moose or caribou or sheep or whatever might be in that area. And then he'll come back to the hole and he'll go right back in there. And I've seen him do that for up to a week to 10 days, and even sometimes up to 2 weeks. And a lot of that depends on temperature. If you're getting really nice hot days in April, then if you're up in that 45, 50, 55 degree days where there's not a whole lot of wind and it's just nice and sunny, then those bears are a lot less likely to keep coming back to the den for very long, especially those big boars. The sows, I've noticed, they'll hang out at the den for a few days, but honestly, I've never seen a sow with cubs leave the den and then come back. But I do see them stay at the den longer. I've got a lot of video from phone scope footage over the last few years of seeing them, a sow with cubs. One particular one is a sow with a couple of 2-year-olds that'll be gone this year. But she just hung out, within 100 yards of the den, and it was all wind blown and down to the rock. But she'd be out there laying out in the sun, and the cubs are out there romping and playing around. But when she's gone, she's gone. Like, once they decide to leave, they don't come back to the den. The boars are a lot more likely to just get out, go look around, and come right back up and go to sleep for another day or so. And they'll do that until they either find something to eat or it's warm enough they just want to stay out the whole time. But generally, for the most part, I think I can speak for all of us, if we see a single track outside of a den that hasn't left the hole yet, we're going to hang out and see how big this bear is. So
yeah, it always confused me. Like, if you were to, it takes so long, to the density of bears in an area is pretty limited, especially big bears in an area.
Right.
And so you find a hole like that, it seems foolish to leave it and try to find something else. It's like you found what you were looking for. Now ride it out until you see what you've got. Plus, it seems like the scenario, rather than like you're setting yourself up like in a tree stand, right? You get to set the scenario for the shot.
Right.
You get all this prep time to set up the certain range from the hole with the wind a certain way where you can get away with certain movement, where you can take the shot on your terms when that moment happens. They're not walking and cruising, they're probably just going to poke out a little bit and adjust their eyesight, whatever. And so it seems to me that is the best situation when you find a hole like that.
And those bears are very groggy that time of year too. That's why those bears don't just jump out. All right, it's sunny, and then they're just gone. They don't do that because they don't have. It's almost like they're. a lot of guides I know call them hungover grizzly bears because they get out and they're just they just don't look coordinated, and
That's how I feel in the morning.
Yeah, well, there you go. Old Grizzly Brian.
So,
go ahead.
Yeah, go ahead. No, you go ahead.
Go
ahead, James.
I was just going to say kind of off of what you'd said. When you're planning to go in on a hunt like this, planning your snowshoes is a big thing.
Yeah.
And that's one thing I did is when I went in and I was getting my snowshoes, the lady kind of looked at me like I was crazy because I walked in and I said, and I'm a big guy, don't get me wrong, but I said, I need a pair of snowshoes that's good for a guy that's 300 pounds. And she just kind of looked me up and down and like gave me that kind of weird eyeball. And I'm like, it's for, me and my pack. And that was a preemptive thought there is to pre-plan that you're going to be walking in with enough gear to camp, to process this bear when you hopefully you are successful and to complete your hunt.
Yeah.
A sled is a big thing too, pulling a pull behind sled. That'll be huge that time of year, being able to just pull something behind you.
Right.
But in that particular situation, you mentioned that was exactly what I was going to suggest is that's the perfect time to really set yourself up. You can get to a vantage area. You can make sure you're looking at the exact amount of tracks that are outside of that hole. Are there any cubs? Are there anything? And really get a gauge on it.
So it seems to me, and correct me if I'm wrong, but it seems to me that in my experience, not very many Alaskans are willing to go very far from the sled.
Yeah. I was going to touch on that. No, you're not wrong, Brian.
No,
you're not. How do you put this? Alaskans know that they have a lot of great hunting resources and access means. Okay. 4-wheelers, side-by-sides, airboats, jet boats, super cubs. And I think it's gotten to a point where we're a little bit spoiled.
Yeah.
And the general attitude of a lot of people, and I think we've all been guilty of this as well, is, well, I don't want to shoot a moose over there because there's no trail there and there's no way I'm getting my 4-wheeler there. And so even if we do shoot it, we'll spend an hour and a half or 2 hours making a trail so that we don't have to pack it that extra quarter mile. And that is to the detriment of a lot of Alaskan success, I think, in hunts like this. And you're right. A lot of people, well, not a lot of people, but the vast majority of guys that do actually get out and den hunt for grizzly bears on snow machines, I would say the majority of them are not going to shoot a bear that they can't get the sled to. I haven't met anybody that will.
Yeah.
I could probably name you a half dozen guys right now that kill grizzly bears on a regular basis in April and even the first week of May off a snow machine. And they'll literally do what you said at the beginning of the show, Brian. They'll just about run them down.
Yeah.
And
that's what
they'll find a track that goes down and hits the river bottom and the valley floor and just the willow brush that's covered in 8 feet of snow and it's hard pack, and they can just rip along at 80 miles an hour. And as soon as they come up over the ridge and there's the grizzly bear standing there out of breath because he heard you coming from 2 miles away, they just post up and shoot him. And to me, that's not a hunt. That's a shot. You're just riding and shooting. That's no process of hunting to me.
Well, I got to say that the idea of riding into a canyon, right? And you're on your way in and you go in and you're peeking around, you're looking, you're like, okay, this basin is empty. You turn around and you come right back out. You've been in that canyon, let's say 15, 20 minutes. It's all snow. It's obvious there's nothing there, not a track. You come back out and lo and behold, across your sled, some massive bear tracks just crossed. Right?
Yeah.
Okay. And then it went straight up this face and over. What does Dalton do at this point?
How close are you to the mouth of the valley? And can you get around underneath him and ride over to the other side and see him from underneath if he went up and crested and came down? That's my first question.
We did that multiple times, and there was no sign of him on the other side. So where'd he go?
Well, then he's on top on a nice sunny plateau, sunning himself in a nice blown off area where there's not 10 feet of snow up there. And in that event, I would I mean, I would probably strap on the shoes and start walking.
That's what I mean. Like,
mark your sled mark your sled location in case they get wind blown and covered in snow if you have to spend the night, but bring your kit and prepare to spend the night. And that's another thing that I was going to touch on a second ago, and we can get back to this, but having a mobile idea in your mind of, if I have to spend the night away from the machine somewhere,
right,
do I have like an emergency tarp? I even if I'm leaving my tent somewhere, if I'm up in a valley like this and I'm snowshoeing around for grizzly bears, every time I leave my tent, I've still got my sleeping bag with me. I pack that up and throw it in the bag, and I've still got my emergency tarp. Right now, I'm using the one that Sitka made for a while and discontinued, and I'm pretty bummed about that. But that has a really good design for pitching it with 2 poles in the middle, and it's like a little A-frame design, and the ends are a little bit elongated. That makes for a great emergency shelter. Yep. And having a bivy sack for your sleeping bag. That way, if you do end up away from your machine and it gets dark or a storm comes in, you're a mobile camp unit, and you can safely spend the night out there. And even if it is 50 degrees in the day, it's still getting 15 at night sometimes, right. Or even colder if you get a nice storm.
Right.
But the ability to just say, you know what, we're going to leave the sleds here, strap on the shoes. I've got a sleeping bag, food for a couple of days, a bivy sack, and an ultralight tarp. I mean, that doesn't amount up to much weight in your pack, and then just go up light and spend time up there. Be able to spend up to 2 days away from the machine, and try to find where the bears are going up top, because they're not disappearing into thin air. They're up there somewhere.
To me, that sounds more adventurous. Like following a set of giant tracks on a 9-foot grizz or better. Yeah. And just wondering where he is, or how far he went, or what his pattern was. I mean, just my curiosity for understanding. Like, let's say I did drive around to the opposite side, waited, and then he came off that bluff and I shot him. Yeah. You know, or the next day I saw him in the next basin over. I still am so curious about what he did on top and where he went. And the tracks would tell me a lot. And that to me is fascinating. Yeah. It's something that you can't pay for that with a sled ride, you know, like you can't experience it. I agree. And then coming on like a spot where, oh, wow, we just on our way to find this bear, we came across, let's say, a den in a pocket where no sled can get to, really. Right. And unless you're some X Games athlete, which we ran into a few of those. And there we are, like now camped on another spot you'd never discover if you just stayed to the bottom sled trails, you know. And so there's something about the whole thing that to me screams adventure in a way that you won't experience if you stay by the machine.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. A very wise Alaskan hunter told me one time, and I've actually guided with this guy quite a bit. He said, Dalton, anywhere you can take a motorized vehicle, anybody else can do the exact same thing or better with a better machine and better riding skills. Whether that's a boat, snow machine, airplane, four-wheeler, side-by-side, Argo, you name it. Somebody else has one and has a bigger and nicer one that'll go farther and better than yours will. Yeah. The difference in success rates that I know of across the wide variety of Alaskan outdoorsmen comes to how much sweat equity are you willing to put into your hunt. And the guys, and this is not always true because there is always luck, you know, that there's always the guy that comes around the corner in his jet boat doing 50 miles an hour, and there's a 70-inch bull moose down the middle of the river. And he pulls off and guns it down, and it's, you know, then he's posting about it on Instagram like he's the next Jim Shockey. But consistently, though, the guys that are willing to do like what we were talking about here, and just, well, I don't see the bear. I know he went up that way. I'm willing to put in the effort that maybe he's on top, and I'm going to go get him. Those are the kind of guys that's the kind of attitude that consistently kills the most trophy class animals in Alaska by far. The willingness to break yourself away from that machine access, because like you said, anywhere you're going to ride, some X Games rider with a bigger, nicer sled that'll take powder better or that can climb half of a mountain is going to go there. You got to pick a spot where he can't get.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah. I really did experience that. So Let's talk about snowshoes themselves. I have a pair of MSR High Ascent or something. They're the aluminum kind of metal frame. And they're a pretty big set because I thought, well, with a 100-pound pack plus my weight, I wanted this. But then when I used them in Alaska, I found that they were they're not easy to use. They're pretty heavy duty, pretty big. And so Lampers and I got the MSR XO, I think the little plastic ones.
Okay. Yeah.
And a lot of people love those. Other guys said, no, it's not enough. They have the little 6-inch tails that you can add to them if you want a little more float. And they're kind of more like a tennis shoe, almost. Like Ryan has been wearing them for the past week, testing them out, comparing all the different snowshoes that he owns to see. And he said, yeah, I sink a little more in this, but let me tell you, those XOs seem to be the easiest by far to maneuver and climb and get on hills and come down and stuff in those.
Yeah, that's a difficult decision to make because you're looking at two things: flotation and articulation. Because, for instance, the spot that I'm talking about that I've gone into multiple times, like I said, that ascent going up in there is pretty near straight up and down for the first quite a ways. And it's through the alder brush. And of course you have snowpack that puts you up. If you have 12-foot alder brush, and when I say alder brush in this spot, I'm talking about 2-3 inch round alders. Okay. These are like small trees. And you're not walking at the bottom of this brush where it's open at the bottom of the shoots.
Right.
Okay. You're walking at the top third where all the branches come off and it's just a big tangled, light, movable mesh of alder brush. And it gets caught on everything, rifle barrels, and especially snowshoes, right? And so not only are you trying to go straight up, the snowpack is terrible. You're sinking in every couple of steps. You're going up to your knee or worse. But then you have wet, heavy snow that once you post hole down that far, you're having to pick up that foot, if you even can, on balance with your other foot and pick up all that snow that lumps in on top of that shoe. Right. And that is what makes it so difficult, because it's not that you have to just pick up that big, long shoe out of the snow. It's that you have to pick up all that snow with it. And that gets really exhausting. And that's why if I take a partner in there, we'll take turns breaking trail, because that is a lot of work.
Right.
I right now I've got a set of Atlas 32-inch. I think they're aluminum frame.
Yeah. Mine
have quick lock BOA bindings. I used to snowboard quite a bit, and Mo and I did too. But it's that same type of snowboard type binding for your boot, and it's just a quick pop and it just loosens it. And that way, if you do sink in far enough that you cannot get your foot out, if you get the front of that shoe underneath like a little root or the bottom of a little bush, you're not getting it back up out of there, because you can't articulate and reach around and grab it and get it loose without just popping it loose. So it's really handy to have like a quick lock binding like that, where you don't have two straps that come over your boots, because it's really hard to get those undone blind behind your back when you're reaching in behind yourself, 3 feet down into the snow. And that just gets old. So for me, I really like those quick lock bindings. That's a really good design for me. Like I said, I've tried those 32-inch Atlases. That's what I've still got. They do work really well. I think they have the best flotation of any of them that I've used. I've used the real small boxy looking MSR ones before. I've tried them and I returned them because I didn't feel like they gave me enough balance. I'm 6'2" and James is what, 6'4", 6'5", 6'6", yeah. And so I have a lot of lateral stability problems in the snow as far as snowshoeing goes, and especially like in that rotten snow, it just gets really hard to keep your balance. And so for me, being a taller guy, I just find it better for me to just use those long shoes, and I'll just deal with them getting stuck. And if I have to, I'll just pop them off and then just reset. And
And it's not just the forward and backwards, because I've got the exact same ones, but in the 35-inch version.
Yeah.
And but the Atlases, they really do a good job of providing that side to side balance point as well. With a lot of them, I've found when you're walking through the snow and you're just kind of trudging along and you hit that one soft spot and it just sinks down and you kind of start to teeter over a little bit, and you know for a fact you're on top of like a 5-foot deep berm and everything, and you don't want to fall into that. The Atlases I've found have provided the best platform to kind of not lose your balance on. They're less tippy, I guess would be the word I'd use.
I think a really good way, and you tell me if I'm wrong here, but when I walked on the MSRs, on those real square ones, the real boxy design, I felt like I was raised off the snow when I walked on those. The Atlases, I feel like my foot, I feel like I'm still walking on the snow at normal height. I don't feel like I'm elevated. And I think that's where that balance comes from.
Yeah. It basically, it feels like you're just walking on top of the, on the ground. Yeah. You know, there's such little sink and there's very little kind of teetering back and forth. And it feels very solid as you're going through.
I'd have to try, because the MSR I have I used them last year. Yeah. And wore them every day. I didn't feel tippy or anything like that. They just were big. You know, it doesn't matter. Yeah. Like they're just long. And so you're like doing this cowboy walk, you know, bow-legged as you're going along.
Oh, yeah. No.
And I wasn't moving very fast.
You get sore muscles in your lower half that you don't know you had.
Yeah.
Well, in one area that comes in handy in Alaska is that our snow here, not so much in that time of year, but especially throughout the year here, is a lot drier than in other parts of the state. It's a very much more fine powder. And so you kind of have to run a little bit longer snowshoe to stay afloat on some of that softer stuff. You'll just sink right through it otherwise.
Because when I was up there with Chris, for example, he had the Atlas, I had the MSR, but we kept the same pace. We did all the same stuff, about the same everything. And I looked at his, I like the binding. I didn't have troubles with it at all. It's more like just you shove your foot into the pocket and then there's a strap around the back.
Yeah.
And it was pretty easy to get on and off because I did get jammed up a few times. I just had to take the whole thing off. I mean, I cussed a lot. And, and then they have the elevator bar that comes up for going uphill.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
And I didn't know that was a thing, so I didn't use it. And now I look back and go, man, I wish I'd known about that.
It's game changing.
I'm like, what's that stupid bar for? It just sits there, you know? It would help to, you know, do a little. Chris was no help. So I would say, I'm very curious. Ryan has been hammering the XO, and I'm bringing both, you know, because I want to test them. The other thing I wanted to test was the skis, the Altai,
the touring skis.
Yeah, because looking at the videos, it seems to me that uphill and across flats, like these things are like you can move in them well. And people, the reason the people who said they didn't work were when they were trying to go downhill. That the downhill part was actually really tough. And I watched a video on YouTube, my first video, which had I was looking for the one with millions of views, and I found it. So I watched it, and this dude is like skiing down in these skis, and he's just like kicking butt. And I'm like, Ryan, dude, we need these skis, man. Check this guy out. And he's like, I heard they're really hard to use downhill. Then I started reading the comments, and there was hundreds of guys in there going, yeah, that guy's phenomenal. Don't think you can do this. Nobody can ski in those like that. That's a freak right there. That ain't right. That's misleading video right there. So at that point I was like, oh, okay. But it's still, I followed a bunch of guys online as I'm doing my YouTube research through YouTube and Google and stuff. What I come across is a lot of guys are using those skis, but they're still packing their snowshoes, and they switch back and forth depending on where they're trying to go and what hill they're tackling. And I was like, man, that's a lot to carry. But I suppose, you know, at the end of the day, it's not too much added weight if the efficiency is there.
Right. I mean, there are a couple of guys up here. Well, there's one in particular that I'm thinking of, and he's actually a sponsored winter sports guy. He snowboards and he does the whole split boarding thing, and has those touring skis that I think they're like a touring ski that he uses to get up the mountain, and then on his way down they clip together and he'll snowboard down. Now, I'm not sure that's going to be a good idea for hunting, even how fun it might be. But
sign me up, bro. Sign me up.
I'll try anything once.
On the way down, you have to wear your X Games shirt, though.
Yeah,
shoot a little video.
Are you kidding? You know how many people would watch that video? It'd be great.
Yeah. Millions, Brian, millions.
As I watch Brian Lambert's face plant, I love it.
Yeah, bear you're dragging behind you just slams right in.
Yeah, especially if you're dragging a bear down behind you. Be careful with that. I don't know anybody personally up here that has used those touring skis for hunting. I know a couple days ago you and I were talking about this, and you know a couple of guys in the lower 48 that have gone on goat hunts in BC, and they've alternated use like that. They've gone in on touring skis, then they'll go to snowshoes where they can't ski, and then once they get to where there's not enough snow, then they'll just hike with crampons up from there, right? And obviously, it goes without saying, when you can switch to crampons and boots, if it's hard enough packed snow, man, that's when you're really going to cover your ground. But I think a lot of the success there is going to be figuring out how you're going to pack all that in. Because especially if you're going in through any kind of brush or really any foliage at all, if you have snowshoes hanging off your pack, it's one more thing to hang up on. But a lot of the guys and the fellows that we were talking about a couple of days ago, their method was they were dragging in sleds behind them on the skis. And they would, I believe they were stashing the skis at one spot, and then they would snowshoe in, and then they would just boot hike with crampons up from there. Then on the way out, they would just grab the snowshoes, hike back to the skis, and then ski all the way out. And so if you could form something like that, but that's like if you have one particular spot you're going, and you guys are doing a very much roving style. So that probably wouldn't work as well in that. But if I could try it and just pull in a sled and ski in and have snowshoes in the sled as a backup, I'd be willing to try it 100%. I've never skied. I've never even put skis on my feet yet. I've been pretty gun shy of that. I haven't even snowboarded since a year before I got married, and my wife still does. And I told her that I only ever snowboarded to impress her, and I was never very good at it. So
he wasn't.
My snowboarding days are over. But
I loved it. I love snowboarding. I was nuts.
I would be definitely willing to try that touring ski idea, though, for sure. That sounds like it'd be a good way.
Yeah. That's an intriguing one. I don't know that we didn't buy them. We didn't get set up with them. We didn't have time to really test them. So we probably won't be using them. I'd
be really curious to know how they do in that wet, poor snowpack conditions. Because like I said, it just gets to be that soft, wet crust on top. And then everything underneath for the bottom 4 feet is just, I call it sugar snow. It's just like crystals.
It is.
And it's just nasty. There is no flotation in that. For instance, I know I gave you the name of a book that talks about some guys that go riding in on snow machines. Excuse me. And but their method for that time of year, because of the snowpack conditions, they would ride in at like 3 o'clock in the morning after it'd been cold for several hours, and the snowpack had a chance to kind of refreeze. And then they would hunt for the day, but they wouldn't do much riding during the day at all, because that snowpack heats up and the snow conditions deteriorate greatly. And you end up getting the mountain sleds stuck out in the middle of nowhere, and nobody's coming out to help you, man. You're on your own. And then riding out at night, and those guys had story after story about crashing into, overflowed creek or tipping a machine over off of an edge because they lost stability. And the snow that time of year, at least for me, and I would not consider myself by any means an expert sled rider, but I do know a lot of guys that do that, and I just tend to stay away from it because I've heard too many horror stories about guys getting in a long ways, and sleds are a great way to put on a ton of miles. There's a saying that Mariah's dad told me years ago on the trap line. you can ride in a day on a snow machine what'll take you a week to walk out if you break down. And that is 100% true. You can cover 100 miles, but I mean, we all know how fast you can walk through 6 feet of snow. So you got to really pick your battles and really be careful about where you go depending on snow conditions.
Get yourself in trouble real quick.
Yeah, you could end up getting a ride out in a helicopter that's the wrong color. And
well, there was that. I mean, there was definitely avalanche possibilities in a lot of the spaces. I mean, the snow last year was really deep and lasted a long time. Last season when I was around, and so it can be pretty intense. But I heard that was pretty much an anomaly. The snow was really nice. You're talking about brush. There really was no brush. It was where we were at was snow, and deep snow. There was nothing to slog through. It was nice snow. Yeah. So well, that's good. But I imagine it can change every year. And a bunch of people we ran into, like the like the guys on the big loud machines, they were like, yeah, this time last year it was all water and dirt. So, this is really cool. This is great, So I wouldn't be surprised if, it's so weather. It's so weather can,
and right now, the weather that we're having, it's not impossible that could be the case this year. I mean, today and yesterday, it was in the low 40s.
Yeah.
I mean, water is just gushing off of everything. Yeah. Now, where you're going, it's been a little bit colder, but it's still headed for a more normalized, if not a little bit sooner breakup this year.
Yeah.
But
And it can change in an instant.
All right, that's it, folks. This is part 1. We just finished that. Look for part 2 to get the rest of this podcast. Hope you enjoyed it. Don't forget, support us by shopping over at Peaks Equipment or at Stealthy Hunter, both great partners. And also check out Initial Ascent if you're in the market for a new backpack. Can't recommend them enough. Thanks for tuning in. Stay gritty.